people want to love you better, but can't love you better because their dysfunction won't give their love permission to love you right. The question is, what's leading your behavior? Because that's what's going to determine what my experience with you is like. Not whether or not you love me, but whether or not you got issues that are a threat to my well-being under control.
It is a new year, but you might be listening to this and feeling like even though we're only 1 week into 2025, you are already caught up in the same mess, in the same bull that you were caught up in 2024. And you may feel that way, especially when it comes to relationships, that you're reading the books, you're listening to the podcast, you're watching all the videos on YouTube and TikTok and Instagram, and you're trying to take all of this advice on dating and relationships, and it does not seem to be working for you. If you're wondering why it may not be working for you, this episode is the answer that you need. So, I want to welcome you to Christian-ish. My name is Keshia Rice. I'm a dating coach, I'm a hypnotherapist, and I help women learn how to heal from their unhealthy relationship patterns and learn how to, thrive in their feminine and to attract healthy, cherished relationships. I say that this podcast is for the women who have Bibles, but they need boundaries. And that is what brings us to today's episode. Because I was listening to a clip from one of my favorite preachers, Dr. Darius Daniels. So pause for a second, listen to this, and we'll come back on the other side. Okay, so Dr. Daniels was talking about how there are times when people want to love us, but because they haven't healed from their trauma and because they have all of these issues that they haven't dealt with, they can't properly love us, no matter how much they want to, no matter how hard they try. And while that's true, it also got me thinking about in our lives, how sometimes we want to have better relationships, we want to attract better and do better for ourselves, and we can't, even when we know what is right. This was one of the things that I dealt with in so many areas of my life, right? I've always been the type of person who is a studier, who is a learner, who is a reader. I love that verse, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, because that's definitely me, right? And one of the things that I had to learn when I started my own business, when I got serious about, meeting the person who would become my husband, all of these different things, when I got serious about, wanting to be healthier, be in better shape, lose weight, all of that good stuff, is that it is one thing to know something, to have the knowledge, to have read the books. It is another thing to embody that knowledge, to actually be able to put it into action. And this is one of the things that hoses us when it comes to relationships. In fact, I would argue it is the main thing that hoses us when it comes to relationships. Excuse me, guys. If you can't tell, my allergies are seriously acting up tonight. So if I have to pause a few times for water, you know what's going on. But again, back to this idea of us hosing ourselves. One of the main things that keeps us stuck in unhealthy relationships is this attachment to the way that we used to do things. Our brains do not like change. So when we are trying to become a different person, a better person, we do all this work to learn the how, but then we get into situations where we've learned all of the things, but then once the test comes, once the opportunity comes to show how much we've learned, we fail. And a lot of that has to do with our nervous system. So let me explain a few things to you first. And I know this is going to get a little sciencey, but I promise that once you understand these basic concepts, and I'm going to keep it very basic for you, once you understand these, it will make so much more sense as to why you are struggling with having the relationship that you want. So let's look at what our nervous system is to begin with. So we have what is called our autonomic nervous system, and that controls how our body functions. You know, it is all the things that God put in place so that we can stay alive. And there are two main branches. So one is your sympathetic nervous system, and that controls like your fight or flight response. You know, again, our nervous system is all about survival. And then we have our parasympathetic nervous system, and that controls things like digestion and rest. And when our nervous system is not regulated the way that it should be, it causes our body to be stuck in the state of overactivity, the state of stress, and that can make it difficult to regulate your emotions, and it can also make it difficult to make sound decisions, right? So when we have this dysregulation going on, there's a few ways that we respond to it. By having stress, by being anxious all the time, by going into, I mentioned the sympathetic nervous system, by going into either fight, flight, or freeze. You probably understand fight and flight. Freeze is when you become so stuck between decisions that you don't make a choice. Like, you often see this in relationships where someone knows that she's in a bad relationship, but she's so afraid of the consequences of getting out, and she's so afraid of upsetting the person and telling that person that she's with that she's not happy, that she just ends up doing nothing and staying in the relationship and being miserable. And this can also lead to people pleasing, because this is a way to soothe ourselves and try to avoid anxiety. Like, we feel safer when we have approval from other people. You know, this goes back to when we were babies. This is why babies are so cute, right? From an evolutionary standpoint, the fact that they are so cute means it's more likely for them to be protected. And that is key to their survival, since they can't do much on their own. And it's no different from us. We become these grown adults, but we still seek validation from others. We still seek approval from other people, because we feel like if we have that validation and approval, we are safer in this world. And this is especially true if you dealt with any trauma when you were a younger child. You know, if your parents weren't the most emotionally intelligent, if they weren't always available to you, if caregiving was inconsistent, if there was anything that happened in your childhood that caused you to feel unsafe. And, you know, I have to be careful when I talk about trauma, because this can be the big things that are criminal. And I'm not going to name those things because I don't want to re-traumatize anyone. These can also be the seemingly, and I use this very loosely when I say that they're smaller, but smaller things like being bullied that would also lead you to feel not as safe as a child. Or having parents that, I know so many people who, particularly people whose parents grew up poor or who are the children of immigrants, oftentimes feel a little sense of neglect and abandonment from their parents, not because their parents intentionally did so, but because their parents were working so hard to put food on the table and working all these extra long hours that they weren't in the home as much. And you can know the motivation for your parents being inconsistent and not being around and still be deeply affected and hurt by that. And also, just because you haven't done the work on yourself, if you have not done the inner work, the shadow work, and we'll get to that in a minute, to regulate your own emotions, you are going to turn to outside sources for that validation. And that leads to a lot of people pleasing. So here's where that comes in when it comes to having unhealthy relationships. First of all, because you are not regulated, because you have these unhealthy, inconsistent relationships, not just romantically, but in other areas of your life, because you may be feeling anxious and constantly seeking validation from others, this can lead to a lot of emotional burnout. And this leaves you constantly feeling drained. It leaves you feeling resentful towards others. And you can get to this point where you may desire a healthy relationship, but because everything that you know about relationships is tiring and exhausting, there's a part of you that has a fear about being in a stable relationship. And that can lead you to do things to sabotage, to push people away. All of this dysregulation can also lead to unhealthy boundaries because, again, you have this fear of rejection, you have this fear of confrontation and how people are going to react when you set and enforce your boundaries. So that leads to you making the decision to not confront things at all, to not speak up for yourself. And then you hear all of these things about, oh, you should expect a person to treat you this way, or you should expect to feel like this in a relationship, and you don't feel these things. You're not experiencing that, but you won't speak up. So that's why the advice from dating coaches, dating content creators isn't working for you, because you get in these relationships and you keep hoping for better treatment, but people can't read your mind. And even though there are some basics for how you should be treated, there are some bare minimum things, each person is also different. So there are things that offend you that don't offend other people. And people aren't going to understand that this is how you need to be treated. These are the things that you need, unless you know how to speak up. Closed mouths don't get fed. So, more importantly though, remember back when we were talking about fight or flight and freeze and all of that? One of the biggest reasons why all of this advice from coaches and content creators is not working for you is because one thing to know how to act, it is another thing to actually be able to act. So again, you find yourself in these situations where you want to set boundaries. You want to teach people how to treat you. You want to teach people how it is that you need to be loved. And then you get into a situation and you start putting a lot of pressure on that situation. You meet a man and you think, oh, this is it. This has to be the relationship for me. This has to be my husband. And because you put that pressure on yourself, then he does something where you don't like the behavior. And it may not even be malicious on his part. He just doesn't know. And it could be something simple that once you have a conversation, he's like, oh, okay, that's cool. I won't do that again. I didn't know that that triggered you or that offended you or anything like that. But because you have put so much pressure on the situation, and because your nervous system is not regulated, you won't speak up. You'll freeze when it comes time to have that conversation. Or you'll try so hard to sound tough that instead of it being a compassionate, caring, calm conversation, you start to come across as accusatory. You never do this. You never do that. You don't care about what I need. And instead of you calmly expressing your boundaries, you get accused of nagging because frankly, that's what you're doing. You're nagging, right? And then the conversation doesn't go well. And you and this other person are now in a place where you're upset with each other. You two don't completely understand each other. And you're at an impasse on how to get over this because neither of you is properly communicating. So it is not until you learn how to regulate yourself that this can be fixed. Because once you learn how to regulate your nervous system, you are more confident. You have better self-regulation skills, so you can control your own emotions. You are more self-aware. You understand what your triggers are. You can be more intentional about avoiding your triggers so that things don't escalate to a point where they get out of hand. And you are more empowered to take control of situations, including having difficult conversations. So you may be wondering, how is it that you change the cycle, that you break the cycle, you break what is probably a generational curse in your family? Because oftentimes people who don't know healthy ways to communicate and manage their emotions are often the children of people who have the same issue. So we want to break these curses. We want to be better. We want to attract better. And that starts with learning how to regulate yourself. And there are a few ways that you can do that. One is breathing techniques. You know, the past year and a half or so, I've been going to Pilates, and there are so many benefits to that, right? Like, I definitely feel healthier. I've toned up some. I've lost some weight, all of that good stuff. But I think for me, one of the biggest benefits of Pilates has been the focus on breathing, because I find myself so often outside of class really thinking about how I'm breathing and whether or not I'm breathing deeply enough, and my body's getting all the oxygen it needs and all of that. But also that focus on deep breathing is calming. It does so much to calm your nervous system and help you regulate your emotions. So deep breathing is one thing. Grounding exercises, just learning how to be more present in the moment, which is also just a really important part of feminine energy too, learning how to be more present. Therapy can help you with regulating your emotions, both therapy and coaching as well. I am not a therapist, and I know that there are definitely therapeutic techniques that I've explored over the years, seeing a therapist myself that have helped so much with regulating my emotions and being more emotionally intelligent. But as a coach, there are some things that I can do as well with my clients with increasing self awareness, which is why I always think that those two work together, both therapy and coaching. They don't compete. But, personally, I've seen therapists and coaches at the same time. I have many clients who see me and they also see a therapist. And I feel like when you have the two of those things together, you get so much more out of it. That brings me to also having a support system. So your support system can be the professionals, your therapist, your coach, but also friends and family who have gone through this journey as well, who understand what you're going through and who are willing to hold you accountable. And then there's but there's the mindset work that you do on your own that is so crucial to learning how to spend time with yourself, learning how to enjoy your own company, and learning how to do some of the work for yourself. Because again, as helpful as a therapist is or a coach is, part of the points of therapy and coaching is that you should get to a point where I don't want to say don't need those things ever again, but you should get to a point where you can do a lot of this work for yourself. And part of learning that is through journaling, which I have 2 journals that I will link you to. One is on ending self-sabotaging behaviors, and the other is on healing after a breakup. Doing shadow work, which journaling is part of that, and we can talk more about that in future episodes. And also committing to doing the mindset work in how you think. So that is positive affirmations, that is subliminals, and something that I'm a huge fan of is hypnosis. Hypnotherapy can really help you delve into where certain patterns came from, and it can help you establish new patterns and new ways of thinking so that you can move forward and so that you can have more confidence when you are enforcing your boundaries, when you are going out there and meeting the right person and having the faith that the people who are right for you are going to be there for you. And you don't have to act out of a desperate energy or people-pleasing energy in order to have a relationship and maintain a relationship with them. So hypnotherapy, I think, is a amazing start to a lot of the shadow work, because you have someone guiding you through it, someone helping you with those sessions, but then you also have the ability afterwards to do self-hypnosis as well, and listen to audios on your own, work on the mindset stuff outside of those hypnotherapy sessions, and then you can see all of that work start to compound on itself. And you can see, like, once you have this awareness of what is going on in your subconscious mind, it becomes so much easier to look at your daily conscious behaviors and recognize where you're starting to go left, right? And to stop that before it happens. So if you're interested in working with me with hypnosis, you can message me on social media. I'm at Keshia Race on TikTok, on Instagram, and on YouTube. And I will also put in a link in the show notes to booking a hypnosis session with me. But again, I want to emphasize that as much as we want to have healthy relationships with other people, it all starts with the relationship that we have with ourselves. And until you learn to regulate yourself, until you learn to be present and to focus on pleasing yourself and not others, and to seek the validation and love that you need from yourself, you'll never have the healthy outside relationship that you're seeking. So, I want you to spend some time today thinking about situations in which you revert to behaviors that you know are not healthy for you. So when was the last time that you resorted to people pleasing in hopes of solving a problem? When was the last time you wanted to speak up about a situation and you didn't? When was the last time you tried to speak up about a situation, but you became so overwhelmed with emotion that you weren't able to clearly communicate what it was that you needed? Take some time to write and journal about those things and see if you notice any patterns coming up. And in the meantime, I will work on more episodes about shadow work and about emotional regulation, because self-love starts with self-accountability. And if we spend 2025 focusing on how we're going to work on ourselves and be more present and love ourselves more, I know you will end this year loving yourself more, closer to yourself, closer to God, and if not already being in the healthy romantic relationship that you desire, being much closer to that as well. So I will talk to you soon. Love you so much. Bye.
This podcast is brought to you by Contessa Digital.